Now, Republic of Azerbaijan, for most of its history, certainly in the last many centuries, would have been part of the Persian Empire. But the Persian Empire lost most of its Caucasian territories, if you will, to the Russians over the course of a number of military defeats in the 19th century. So you have the reality of about 10 million Azerbaijanis living in what is today the modern Republic of Azerbaijan, and about twice as many ethnic Azerbaijanis living inside of Iran. You know, the two countries clearly are so similar in so many ways in terms of history and all the rest of that. And yet, in terms of political decision of the respective leaderships, they're so different. And specifically on foreign policy, they've chosen to go very different directions. So Iran, as we know, is sort of adhering to this revolutionary political Islamic system since 1979 with the coming of Ayatollah Khomeini. Republic of Azerbaijan and the leadership in that country, Heydar Aliyev, the first president of that republic, and his son, Ilham Aliyev, they've chosen to go in a very different direction. So in terms of their foreign policy, Azerbaijan has mostly either looked to the West, and when that hasn't really worked out, which has often been the case, they've looked to countries like Turkey. Azerbaijan has also looked to Israel for sort of foreign policy support, if you will. Ethnic Azerbaijanis have been part of the rest of Iran for 5,000 years. The notion that this is not Yugoslavia, this isn't something that was banged up together after Second World War. They have been living there. And I mean, we sit here today and talk about ethnic Azeris being about 20 million. Who knows the real figure? Because they don't track it. The supreme leader of Iran is half Azerbaijani. Azeris are actually not in a bad position as compared to other minorities in Iran because they're Shia.
Yeah, I've made several trips through Iran, and many times the taxi driver is an Azerbaijani Iranian, or in fact, often not even calling themselves, they're often calling themselves an Iranian Turk. And I have asked a couple of times whether they thought there was any sort of possibility that area would want to split off. And they look at me like, well, why? We run this place. So,
I mean, Mark, look at the last few number of kings, including the Shah. I mean, if you go back to the, not Qajar, all the way to the Safavid dynasty, the last 500 years, most Persian kings came from Iranian Azerbaijan. The notion that they are, this minority, powerless, sitting up in the northwest of the country, it's just, if anybody makes that claim, they haven't paid attention to what Azerbaijanis do in terms of politics, in terms of the civil society, in terms of their role in the military. I mean, a lot of the commanders of the Revolutionary Guards are from Azerbaijani background. As far as I can tell, we haven't seen him fully go after and mobilize against Baku for a long time now. What if they did that? Is that something Baku wants to see? I doubt it. I don't think Baku wants to see it.
Israel might like some kind of preemptive conflict against Iran. Israel might somewhat be nudging Baku's posture of slightly more aggressive behavior towards Iran as a way to sort of perhaps lure Tehran into making some missteps, or is that being overly conspiratorial?
Well, that might be the intentions of a country like Israel and others, frankly. I don't think the Azeris are that naive. I think they know exactly what they want out of the relationship with the state of Israel. I mean, they walked into that relationship with the eyes wide open. I don't think any of Iran's neighbors want to be a platform for an Israeli or American or other attack against Iran. I mean, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Iraqi Kurds that have relations with Israelis. None of these countries want the benefits of a relationship with Israel. When it comes to the point where Israel actually might use their territory and go after Iran, which surely would invite Iranian retaliation, that's when these countries will say, thank you, but no thanks. I don't think Azeris are that naive.